Hi friends, it's your boy Cranberry Enthusiast, and happy February first of all. Welcome to another exciting episode of this series in which we are going through the book of Daniel, and I'm just kind of reading it and commenting and thinking wildly about things, if that makes any sense at all. Today I'm a little bit tired, and it also isn't February for me as I record this, although you probably are watching this in February, because this is scheduled to come out in February. Anyway, but I'm tired, but nonetheless we are going to carry on and press forward, and if you have any questions you can watch the first video of this series, and that may answer your questions. Otherwise, feel free to comment down below, and also if you've made it this far in the video, thank you for watching this far. And please comment down below your favorite brand of cabbage. Alright, without further ado, let's get started with Chapter 2. Book of Daniel, Chapter 2, from the NASB, 2020 version. Now, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar being the king we discussed about earlier, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. Yeah, it seems like he would, but of course here in this context, well, we're going to see. And his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. Then the king gave orders to call in the soothsayer priests, the conjurers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. So Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and they were seemed like they were pretty intense dreams, pretty bad dreams. His spirit's troubled, you know. You probably are, unfortunately, well aware of the feeling of waking up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night and being like, oh, it was just a dream. And, but apparently Nebuchadnezzar's dreams were really bad here. And his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. So now the king's got insomnia, which is probably not a good sign. When you are dealing with insomnia, you may not be making the best rational decisions, so to speak. So so the king then is calls in the soothsayer priests, what are soothsayer priests? Let me, priest who is, oh, okay, a soothsayer is a person who's supposed to be able to foresee the future, so it's like, you know, fortune tellers, basically. So the conjurers, and what are conjurers again? Let me do some quick. A person who conjures. Yeah, so, which if you conjure, it's like you bring something up. To call on or summon by a sacred name. So, or to affect or effect by or as if by magic. So basically, you know, fortune teller, musician, magician people, and again sorcerers, which we all probably know, and the Chaldeans, which we talked about. They're like kind of the wise men of Babylon, basically. So to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and they were standing before the king. And then next verse, the king said to them, I had a dream. By the way, if you've watched the VeggieTales version of Daniel, this is where one of the stories is from, which you probably already knew. Good for you. So the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to understand the dream. Which, to be fair, I mean, obviously, you know, English didn't exist as a language back then, but even in, like, the original manuscript this was written down, it's kind of a, well, people debate about it. Personally, I'm like, I don't think necessarily the dialogue is exactly word for word. It's more like, you know, the gist of what someone was saying, so to speak. So the king may not have been like, my spirit is anxious to understand the dream. Or, you know, but that was what was conveyed through what he was telling all these magicians and people. So anyway, then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, which I guess the king could understand. I kind of wonder what they were speaking before. But anyway, it doesn't say, but that's okay. O king, live forever. Tell the dream to your servants, and we will declare the interpretation. So, I mean, that seems pretty self-explanatory. The king's like, I have a dream. I'm really anxious. I want to know what it means. Because probably back then, and I don't know. Because given the number of weird dreams I've had that are most certainly not prophetic or have any real meaning other than that I ate some weird pizza the night before or whatever, you know, it definitely seems like the king is like, okay, this dream is a real dream. Like, it's real enough to me that it's something's going on here, and I feel like some sort of higher power is talking to me. I feel like that would be like seemingly what the king is thinking about, and so he wants to know what it means. So then the Chaldeans are like, yeah, tell us the dream and we will say what it means. The king replied to the Chaldeans, the command from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be turned into a rubbish heap. Which, I'm sorry, that's a really serious thing. It sounds kind of hilarious. You will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be turned into a rubbish heap. Which probably meant that literally, but also, from a symbolic standpoint, if your house is turned into a rubbish heap, it's like, this person is done. Their reputation is bleh. So, but anyway, so the king is like, tell the, you got to tell me the dream and the interpretation. So the king apparently forgot his dream, which, if you've had dreams, as I'm sure you probably have, I have, a lot of times you wake up and you remember your dream for a minute, and then like you become more awake and your subconscious kind of goes back to sleep or whatever, and you kind of forget what you were dreaming about. You maybe remember bits and pieces, but it's kind of gone. And so seemingly this is what happened to the king. So, but the king continues, but if you declare the dream and its interpretation, you will receive from me gifts and a reward and great honor. Therefore, declare to me the dream and its interpretation. So the king really be out here like, yeah, I can't remember my dream. So you're magicians, you can see the future, so you say. So you tell me the dream, because you should be able to do that. It's not too hard. I know I have the dream. Like, tell me what it is, because I can't remember it, and then and also its interpretation. So anyway, magicians are like, it says here, they answered a second time and said, let the king tell the dream to his servants, and we will declare the interpretation. So they're like, apparently they know that they can't, they apparently are confident enough that they can tell the king what the dream means, or at least what they would think that it would mean. But it's, they seem very much convinced that they, regardless of what their practices were or whatever, that they would not be able to, tell the king's dream. Which I think we're going to actually learn a little bit more about this here. So the king replied, I know for certain that you are trying to buy time, because you have perceived that the command from me is firm, that if you do not make the dream known to me, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed together to speak lying and corrupt words before me until the situation is changed. Therefore tell me the dream, so that I may know you can declare to me its interpretation. So we have the king. The king isn't backing down. And he's like, if you're real wise men, if you're real magicians, if you're able to tell me the interpretation, if you have that spiritual insight, you should be able to know what my dream was. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is no person on earth who could declare the matter to the king, because no great king or ruler has ever asked anything like this, or of any soothsayer, priest, sorcerer, or Chaldean. Moreover, the thing which the king demands is difficult, and there is no one else who could declare it to the king except gods, whose dwelling place is not with mortal flesh. So the Chaldeans, magicians, are like, jig is up. We can't do it. No one can do it. Mr. King, your request is absolutely, it's crazy. Nobody can do that. So they give it to him pretty straight there. Because of this, the king became angry and extremely furious, and he gave orders to kill all the wise men of Babylon. So, so the king, who's, again, he's not able. He's an insomniac now because he's so disturbed by this dream. He becomes angry, and I mean, to be fair, the king probably was kind of a little bit, maybe things I would want to, like, the adjectives I want to use to describe the king would have probably gotten me executed if I would have used them back when the king was king in Babylon there. And so, but anyway, so the king, hot temper, became angry, extremely furious, and gave orders to kill all the wise men of Babylon. So all the wise men. So not just these people who were before him and being like, nobody can do it. And the king's like, I guess he's like, no, nobody can do it. Well then, to death with all of you go to death. Be put to death. I can't talk right now. All of you are sentenced to death because you can't do things. So the decree was issued that the wise men be killed, and they looked for Daniel and his friends to kill them, because Daniel and his friends are some of the wise men. Then Daniel replied with discretion and discernment to Arioch, A-R-I-O-C-H, Arioch, the captain of the king's bodyguard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. Which, to be fair, if you got a notice that, like, hey, the government, the government wants you dead, and has sent people to kill you, I mean, just the fact, again, I think I mentioned last time, Daniel is really one of my favorite, like, personality type people in the Old Testament. And, I mean, the fact that he's able to reply with discretion and discernment to the guy who's going over to kill them. So he, meaning Daniel, said to Arioch, the king's officer, "For what reason is the decree from the king so harsh?" Then Arioch informed Daniel of the matter. Also, praise God for Arioch. The guy's not a bloodthirsty machine. He probably went and was like, hey, so, by order of the king, I have to kill you guys. That had to be a really awkward conversation. Although maybe Arioch is used to killing people. I don't know. We don't have his biography, unfortunately. That would be such an interesting read, though. But Arioch, and it seems like Arioch probably knew Daniel, or was like, so he was like, hey, I mean, the king said that you have to die. I don't see any reason why I can't tell you the things, and I'm not going to comment on it, because if you hear me talking bad about the king, then I'm going to be put to death too, probably. But anyway, so he tells Daniel this stuff, basically what we just read earlier about the king's dream and whatnot. So Daniel went in, and he requested of the king, there we go, sorry. So Daniel went in and requested of the king that he would give him a grace period, so that he might declare the interpretation to the king. Then Daniel went to his house and informed his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah about the matter, which Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, so that they might request compassion from the God of heaven concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his friends would not be killed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So Daniel, I mean, quick thinking and smart and bright, he, goes and requests of the king for time. And the king is the king apparently, it doesn't say specifically, but the king apparently, gives it to him. The king's not, he's not, or maybe I don't know, maybe he had a drink of water or something, his head's a little clearer, and so he didn't order Daniel killed right on the spot. So they have a little bit of time. So then Daniel went to his house, and I guess, being a wise man, so someone in the king's court, he would have his own house. I never really thought before, but Daniel was probably fairly well-to-do, he by no means was living on the streets apparently. Now granted, any modern house, middle-class house, is probably miles beyond anything that, even the king's palace. I mean, can you imagine? Anyway, just all the crazy technology that's going on right now. The fact that you are watching this on YouTube or wherever you're watching this, as a video. Anyway, so then they pray, requesting compassion concerning the secret. So they ask God for the secret, for God to reveal what the king dreamed and its interpretation. And then it says, so that Daniel and his friends would not be killed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon, which, that makes me think, well, I don't know, maybe it wasn't, but the fact, just that being in there is Yeah, so like Daniel and his friends were like, "Hey, we don't care about any of these other wise men, but like we don't want to die. So like God, please have compassion and show us the thing. But we don't care about the all our colleagues. I mean, they don't know you, so it's like they all are doing their own magic stuff or whatever." Which I'm like, I don't know. Maybe that's not. I would hope that wouldn't be their attitude, and that Daniel and his friends are like, "Hey, you know, we only care about ourselves, like because um, unless the other thing here. See, this is why I really enjoy studying through stuff because we can think about different ways. Unless the rest of the wise men were already killed, maybe they're already dead, because the decree was issued that the wise men be killed, and they looked for Daniel and his friends. It doesn't ever say that they were killed outright, the other wise men, but it also doesn't say that they weren't either. So if they are, then Daniel and his friends are the only ones who are still alive, and so that attitude would be like, hey, God, our colleagues who don't know you, they were all killed, and we're requesting compassion concerning the secret, so that because like we're next in line, and because it seems like the rest from that, maybe the rest of the wise men are already dead, and so Daniel and his friends are the only ones who are left. And so yeah, man, that's regardless. I mean, it's kind of heavy stuff. As bad as it is for the rest of the wise men to have been like executed, which again, you don't know any of these wise men. They probably weren't the best of people. I mean, Babylon was fairly like a brutal and pagan culture and country, from what I understand. So it's very much anyway. It's kind of a wild situation. But again, Daniel and his friends are kind of keeping calm despite all the weird stuff going on. And I mean, given the rest of what Daniel, like his attitude, I guess I would kind of lean more toward the second thing, and that the rest of the wise men are kind of already dead, or are like being executed right then, or some sort of thing. As weird as it is for so many people to be executed like that, but again, that was the king's orders. And so let's get back to the text. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. Not night vision, one word, but in a vision. It's like a dream, but a vision that Daniel had at night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel said, "May the name of God be blessed forever and ever." Put a note there. Be back. "For wisdom and power belong to him. It is he who changes the times and the periods. He removes kings and appoints kings. He gives wisdom to wise men and knowledge to people of understanding. It is he who reveals the profound and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and power. Even now you have made known to me what we requested of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter." So there's Daniel's prayer of thanksgiving. Quickly going back to that note, when the Bible says forever and ever, this is a topic that I still have yet to fully come to a specific confident understanding. But there are places in the Bible where things are translated forever and ever that maybe should not be translated that way. For example, there are certain passages in the Bible that if you take them literally, it says that, for instance, that it makes the Bible contradict itself, basically. And that's a topic for another video. So, Daniel, the point being, in this particular thing, Daniel was, may have been saying, "May the name of God be blessed," across all the ages, so to speak. That might be a better way of rendering what that particular Hebrew or whatever Daniel is originally from that might be a better way of more like, or a more literal way of putting it, so to speak, which that in and of itself probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you right now, which is okay. And again, I might do another like video, because it's really interesting the way that we have so many English translations that will maybe not best encapsulate what the original text was saying, which in this context it doesn't really make a huge difference in my opinion. I don't really see any reason why it wouldn't, but or why there'd be any notable. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out, because every time I see forever and ever now, I'm like, oh yeah, it doesn't always necessarily mean that. Otherwise, I mean, for one thing, like, we'd still be living under the Old Covenant, because the similar words are used to describe, like, the Old Covenant with all, like, the blood sacrifices in the temple of you know, goats and rams and cows and interacting, you know, relationally to God in that sense, as opposed to through Christ, which is a whole other thing. But anyway, sorry for the crazy long tangent, but so but you can kind of feel Daniel's like Thanksgiving, and I mean his prayer of Thanksgiving is really I would say full of like worship, and you can kind of feel his like excitement, like he's not only probably really relieved, like, hey, we don't get to be executed, but you know, it's like, and I don't know if hopefully you have, but if you ever have an experience of where God, it seems like God is smiling at you, or God like helps you out of a seemingly impossible situation, I mean, it's just natural that your heart would overflow with gratitude and stuff. So anyway, it's cool that that's recorded here. So back to the story. Thereupon Daniel went to Arioch, the captain of the king's bodyguard, whom the king had appointed to kill the wise men. We've got to turn the page here. Wise men of Babylon. He went and said this to him: do not kill the wise men of Babylon. Oh, okay. So I guess the wise men of Babylon have not been killed. So, but also Daniel's here and he's like, don't kill them. So obviously Daniel's like, he cares enough about the guys to tell Arioch to like not kill them. Daniel continues, take me into the king's presence and I will declare the interpretation to the king. Then Arioch hurriedly, probably pretty anxious, brought Daniel into the king's presence and spoke to him as follows: I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can make the interpretation known to the king. Shout out Arioch's confidence there. He doesn't say, hey, Daniel says that he will be able to. He says, I have found a man who can do it. And so, anyway, shout out Arioch seems to hold Daniel in high esteem. The king said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered before the king and said, as for the secret about which the king has inquired, neither wise men, sorcerers, soothsayer priests, nor diviners are able to declare it to the king. So Daniel kind of repeats what the wise men had said, you know, there's no man who can do that. However, there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will take place in the latter days, meaning through what Daniel is about to say. This was your dream, and the visions in your mind while on your bed. As for you, O king, while on your bed, your thoughts turn to what would take place in the future. I love how we're like just, I mean, obviously the point is the vision, but it's like Daniel's like reciting, you know, he's like, okay, let's all, the king and everyone in the courtroom here, let's, you know, like rewind. A few nights ago, King's lying on his bed. It's like we're like getting a flashback to the king's nightly routine, I suppose. But anyway, as for you, O king, while on your bed, your thoughts turn to what would take place in the future, and he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will take place. But as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me for any wisdom residing in me more than in any other living person, but for the purpose of making the interpretation known to the king, and that you may understand the thoughts of your mind. So, shout out Daniel's humility there, another really refreshing thing. He's like, you know, it's not, I'm not the one doing the great thing. God wanted this to be revealed to you, and he's doing it through me. Like, that's the thing going on here. So Daniel then goes into it. You, O king, were watching, and behold, there was a single great statue. Giant statue. That statue, which was large and of extraordinary radiance, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was awesome. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen a giant statue, but they generally are pretty impressive. The head of that statue was made of fine gold. Wow. Its chest and its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You continued watching until a stone was broken off without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay, and crushed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed to pieces all at the same time, and they were like chaff from the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain, and filled the entire earth. This was the dream, and now we will tell its interpretation before the king. Okay, so pause here real quick. First of all, I don't know about you, if I had a dream like that, it probably would... It doesn't seem like a nightmare. I feel like I have had nightmares that are, scarier than that, if you take it at face value. But I don't know, depending on how many dreams you have, or how vivid a dreamer you are, sometimes simple dreams can still be absolutely terrifying. I've had dreams. Unfortunately, I can't remember any off the top of my head. I might comment down below if I remember it as an example. But I've had dreams that I remember, and so in the morning, when I write them down or whatever, and I reread them, I'm like, that doesn't seem scary at all, but it was terrifying in the dream. It was like I felt this crazy sense of fear that doesn't, if we just tell the story, it doesn't seem like the fear is so. So that would be my guess of what King Nebuchadnezzar experienced here. Don't know for sure, but anyway. And now the interpretation. So you, O king, are the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the honor. And wherever the sons of mankind live, or the animals of the field, or the birds of the sky, he has handed them over to you, and has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. So, the king's dream, with the statue and everything, it's symbolic. And so Daniel, is really making very clear the symbols here. Which, shout out, Nebuchadnezzar was probably the most powerful man in history at that time, globally, I would imagine. I don't know. But, so anyway, so he's the head of gold. You remember the head of the statue. And after you, another kingdom will arise inferior to you. Then another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over all the earth. And now, the NASB actually has, so this is not as part of the original text, but it has headings. And so, basically it says, according to this, so not just the king is what the gold represents, but the kingdom of Babylon, which the king is obviously the head of. And after you, another kingdom will arise inferior to you, then another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over all the earth. And the NASB labels that as Medo-Persia, the Medes and the Persians, their empire, and then Greece. So we got basically a chronology of empires. Babylon, Medo-Persia, rather, which actually we're going to stay tuned. We're going to get into that later in the series. And then Greece, the third. So Medo-Persia, the silver, Greece, bronze. Then there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron. Just as iron smashes and crushes everything, so like iron that crushes, it will smash and crush all these things. NASB calls that Rome, which, as we know through history, that's the way it is. Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, those empires, they all succeeded each other. And in that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. It will be a divided kingdom. I don't know if you remember in any history classes, but Rome being a divided kingdom. Shout out Daniel just giving a history lesson before history happens here. That, of course, that God revealed to Daniel. It wasn't like Daniel was anyway, we've already read over that. It will be a divided kingdom, but it will have within it some of the toughness of iron, since you saw iron mixed with common clay. And just as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, so some of the kingdom will be strong, and part of it will be fragile. In that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another in their descendants, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not combine with pottery. Just like, oh, I remember in my history classes, the Roman Empire, at the end of the Roman Empire, you'd have all these other people coming in to Rome, and so, but they didn't like mix, like the people who were of like authentic Roman descent, and like they would not mix with the, socially with the other, so it's like, it's a divided kingdom, it's like weak. Wow. So there's that. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it will itself endure forever. Just as you saw that a stone was broken off from the mountain without hands, and that it crushed the iron, the gold, the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will take place in the future, so the dream is certain and its interpretation is trustworthy. That whole section right there, I don't know about if you know, like, in the days of the Roman Empire, that's when Jesus was born, and when he grew up and lived and had his ministry, like, literally, you know, if you've ever read the Gospels, like, that's, so, Daniel's talking about, basically, the kingdom of Christ right there, which, and it's also interesting, because it's talking about Christ's kingdom being established there. And if you are at all familiar with like church culture stuff, it's really kind of a common thing for people to think about Christ's kingdom being established, like, you know, in the next life, or in, you know, at the end of the world. But it's interesting that Daniel kind of talks about the kingdom will be set up like in the days of those kings. So in like, especially, most likely, probably like Rome, and with the fall of Rome and stuff. And so yeah, again, like, there's gonna be stuff later too. I forget how much of Jesus there is in the book of Daniel, prophetic stuff. It's kind of wild. So we're getting toward the end here. So anyway, Daniel finished speaking, and I mean, like, that's pretty impressive, right? I mean, I'm impressed. And apparently King Nebuchadnezzar is too here. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, which is obviously, you know, like an act of like worship, basically. He's like worshiping Daniel, even though Daniel was like, it's not me. But it's just the idea of people just falling on their face. It's awful, and you know, I've seen so many videos of people slipping and falling recently because of all the ice and stuff that are on the sidewalk and whatnot, and it's like painful. It's weird how, like, you know, like, I've even laughed at myself, because it's like, I feel absolutely ridiculous as I'm slipping and sliding and like trying to walk normally, but then falling on my face. Anyway, side tangent. Anyway, so then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and paid humble respect to Daniel and gave orders to present to him an offering and incense. So yeah, the king is like kind of disregarding everything he's saying, and is like basically treating Daniel like, you know, like he is like, you know, like a god, or like, you know. But let's continue here. The king responded to Daniel and said, "Your God truly is a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, since you have been able to reveal this secret." And so, at least, you know, the king did listen to Daniel. He was like, and so he says that Daniel's God is a God of gods, a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets. So this is kind of probably Nebuchadnezzar's first real experience with God, and so, or at least the first one that's recorded as far as I know, aside from like invading like Israel, or Judah rather. But anyway, so yeah, note that, and as we keep going, it'll be interesting too, the following chapters. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon. and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. So like Daniel just kind of shot to the top. He's ruler over the entire province of Babylon, so, and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. So he's like, yeah. And Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the administration of the province of Babylon, while Daniel was at the king's court. So Daniel kind of like honoring his friends or helping his friends out, which his friends were there while Daniel was praying and stuff, and only Daniel got the vision, it seemed like. Yeah. But still, you know, I'm sure, like, Daniel's friends were obviously there for him, and they were in the same boat, so you know, it would make sense they would stick together and stuff. But anyway, it's always cool to, I like that, to see, like, you know, Daniel, like, I love, like whether, you know, in the Bible or I'm reading like a fiction book or like in real life, like I love friendship stuff and people like doing things for each other. So that Daniel making that request and him having like, before them having like a good relationship and stuff is like really, it's really heartwarming. But yeah, and that is actually where the second chapter of Daniel ends. So that's kind of wild. Dreams and magicians, and again, like Daniel kind of displaying his character, and Daniel being honored, like God kind of really blessing him. So you know, there was kind of a bit of a scare there. It was like, you know, Daniel and his friends were sentenced to die, but ultimately, you know, God saved him through it, and it ultimately, you know, Daniel ended up in a way better place. Daniel and his friends ended up in a way better place at the end of the chapter than they were at the beginning of the chapter, and so it's kind of wild. And so, but I'm sure, you know, this is probably, you know, everything's going to be smooth sailing from here on out for Daniel and his friends, right? Like, you know, there won't be any, you know, like, I don't know, like raging fires or hungry lions or anything that they'll have to. Anyway, sorry, spoiler alert. But but anyway, thank you so much, y'all, for tuning in. Hopefully this was maybe informative, maybe entertaining, thought-provoking, just relaxing to have on while you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. And tune in again next time as we dive into chapter 3. Again, happy February, even though it's not February yet. While I'm recording this, I'm probably going to record all these really early in advance, so then just, yeah, so. But anyway, again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all again next time.